against Iowa State. And then speaking of Iowa State and Baylor, tonight in Ames, Iowa State's pretty much led the Big 12 from start to finish. Oklahoma's been a part of that conversation. And then here comes Baylor as they kind of turn things around under first-year head coach Nikki Collin. And the winner tonight will have at least a share of the Big 12 regular season title. Michelle Voepel, ESPN elite women's basketball columnist and writer. Michelle, thanks for your time. I don't know. I got to tell you, back maybe early on in the season, Baylor was 0-2, and it just didn't seem like they had something going. Your thoughts that they're playing tonight to get a share of the Big 12, which they've owned for over a decade?
I really feel like you're right. They have found their groove. It's not necessarily that common that you would have all five players who started every game. You know, they've had the same starting lineup every game, and I think that's led to a lot of consistency for Baylor. You know, the early falling behind 0-2, I think probably kind of created a little bit of a false narrative, which I think all of us were susceptible to, myself included. But since then, I mean, this is a team that just really seems like it's rolling now and feels really confident. So it's kind of cool, you know, to have this game on ESPN2 tonight between the top two teams in the league. And I think hopefully they'll have a really big crowd there in Ames tonight.
How much different are they than the last time they played Iowa State? I mean, as far as X's and O's and on the court.
You know, I don't think they're that much different. One thing that I think we're seeing is the consistency with Queen Egbo. That's something that, you know, I know she's been working hard on, and we're seeing more of that. I think the guard play's been really good this year. And, you know, everyone knows this is a team that's going to shoot more three-pointers than they did previously with Coach Kim Mulkey. And I think that's worked so far for them. But, it still, I think, comes down to who's going to be the best player on the court tonight. And I still think that's Melissa Smith, and that's with no offense to Ashley Jones, who's also a really good player. But Melissa, I feel like it's just, she's a very, very good player, and I think she's going to be a very good pro, and probably took this season pretty personally, in terms of what she wanted to prove.
Michelle, yeah, she's going off a huge performance over the weekend. Michelle, obviously there were big shoes when we talked all about what Nikki Collin walked into, and and look, Kim Mulkey's still doing her thing down there in Baton Rouge. But just what have been your thoughts on watching her from the beginning, where it was a little bit rocky? There's so many questions because everything was so new when people were accustomed to the same thing for so long, and to kind of see the journey she's taken and the way her relationship has matured with the team and so forth. What have been your thoughts just on the development from start to now for Nikki Collin in this program?
There's, as you guys know, there's no way you can come into a situation like that with somebody who's been someplace for 21 years and won 3 national championships and is really, I would say, as big a personality as there is in women's basketball. There's no way to come in and it just be like smooth sailing. It's going to be different. And I think Coach Collin understood that, and probably also understood that there would be, a lot of reaction to anything that was different. For instance, like losing that game to Kansas State, losing twice to Oklahoma, that there would be some, thought that the sky was falling, especially because, not that anybody's surprised, that Coach Mulkey's done really well at LSU. But part of me thinks, maybe this is all, it's all going to work out for both. Right now, I think both programs are looking at very, very good postseasons. They both had good seasons so far, and the postseason looks bright for them. And Nikki's different. She's her own person, and I think maybe it took a little while, and it'll still take a little while. There's still some people who miss Kim, and why wouldn't you? I mean, shoot, she meant so much to that program and that community. But I think it's been really probably good for everybody that Baylor has gone on the run that it has, and that they're looking at a really good postseason. That's just helpful because it's what the fans there are used to.
Melissa Smith, everyone knew how good she's been, and she stepped up. Remember when they beat Notre Dame in the national title game, in fact, in Tampa, when they had the injury to Lauren Cox, and she was amazing then. But there are others. Who right now, Michelle, do you think will be the National Player of the Year, and especially with Paige Beckers being injured for most of the year until recently?
Yeah, I think, I think with her team being number one, basically wire to wire, the 21 consecutive double-doubles, I do think that South Carolina's Aaliyah Boston is probably National Player of the Year. There's going to be considerable sentiment from some quarters for Caitlin Clark, and that's perfectly understandable. She's leading the country in scoring and rebounding, and really in the last week propelled her team back into a top 16 seed, which I think they're going to be. So, there's a lot of attention on those two players, but Melissa Smith is the Wade Trophy winner, the returning Wade Trophy winner, and I think she's had a really good senior season. And right now, I'm projecting her to go number one in the WNBA draft. I just think her skill set translates well, and she has a really high ceiling, and she has a really high motor, which is an important factor for being picked number one. So all three of those players are terrific. But right now, I do think probably Boston is the front runner. But as you guys know, that's all. None of that really matters, right? What really matters is how well you play in the postseason and how you lead your team. That's the ultimate reward, is if you can win a national championship. And all three of those players are going to try to do that.
Michelle, you wrote about the women's basketball players in Russia and Ukraine that are having to leave that behind with the conflict and the war that's going on over there right now. This is maybe an issue in sports that people may not have known much about, but especially for these particular players, this is quite a bit of lost income that they're going to have, and a way of life that's changing and probably profoundly affected by this, because you have relationships with the human beings that you come into contact with, and you're playing months overseas in another country.
That's really true. And I think it's that side. You guys know about it because you're so aware of the women's basketball world, but it's a substantial part of these players' lives. They spend more time over there than they do playing in the United States, a lot of them. So they become, a lot of them do make friends and do become, very much aware of the culture around them. But I think a big concern right now is just how long the conflict will last, how the economic sanctions will impact both countries, how safe it will be. I think that's why a lot of players right now feel like the best thing to do may be to leave. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to come back to the United States right now. It may mean they go to other countries in Europe and play. And from everything I've been told, even though they're under contract in Russia, FIBA, the international governing body, is going to say it's okay for you to sign another contract with somebody else at this point. So some of them may be doing that, but it is a concern. All these women, for the most part, are really experienced world travelers, but and I do want to say, they've experienced some other difficult things in Russia and other places over the years, but this is probably the biggest threat. Just in terms of the fact that they may have to leave now, and who knows when they may go back if they do leave.
Yeah, I was going to follow up with it. This is not something this is something that could last years and years and years.
Yeah, it could. And Brittany Griner, one of those that had signed with the Russian team, as you mentioned in your article.
Yeah, she's somebody who has been really successful overseas and spent a lot of time in Russia and made a lot of money in Russia. So, ultimately, though, right now, I think the agents are most concerned with safety and with being cut off from, potentially getting to leave. Like right now, everything I've heard from agents is they don't feel like any players are in physical danger right now. More, it's the danger of, if they stay there, will they get to a point where they can't leave, can't get back, and that's a concern right now.
Wild times for sure. Michelle, on the Iowa State side of things, I mean, you mentioned it, and we've mentioned it a couple of times. I expect that to be an electric atmosphere tonight with what's on the line and who the opponent is. They've won 3 straight games after falling to Texas a couple weeks ago. But just your thoughts on the Cyclones this year and the matchup itself tonight, how they stack up against the Baylor women.
It's interesting. I was watching last week. I was over at Kansas to watch Iowa State, and I sometimes feel like I'm in a time machine when you see them, because it's different people, but they play the same way. Bill Fenley has always had that philosophy of shoot it before you turn it over, right? That's what he said his entire time, and they've always been one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. That's a big key. Boy, when they start hitting those threes, and we saw that yesterday with Iowa, with Iowa beating Michigan, just went on this three-point barrage. That's the key for Iowa State. So if they can hit threes tonight, they have a really good point guard. Obviously, they have Ashley Jones. Overall, is Baylor the better team? Probably so. But Iowa State, if they can hit threes, can make that place crazy. We've seen that in Hilton. So what I'm really hoping is it's just a really good game, because I'd like to see the Big 12 get, the national spotlight on a night like tonight.
Well, and the thing is that when Kim had those teams that were winning national titles and year in and year out winning all the things they did, that was a place in which they struggled. That's a program in which kind of at times if someone was going to rise up and bite them, it was going to be Coach Fennelly and Iowa State as well. With the game, well, in fact, you mentioned Kim earlier. Kim, of course, and LSU having a great run. I think they have Tennessee tonight. Is that correct?
They had Tennessee yesterday.
Okay.
So, which ended up being a game that had a pretty good lead in it. Alexis Morris, who started her career at Baylor, went elsewhere, and then has reunited with Coach Mulkey this year. Has had a very good year for them. She's got an MCL sprain, so she didn't play yesterday. They missed her. Not sure if she's going to play in the SEC tournament, but they're hoping she's back for the NCAA tournament. And they're second, finished second in the SEC. So with the team with a lot of seniors, and Coach Mulkey's talked about that she has relied a lot on the seniors that she has in her starting lineup. So I think it's been a really good move for her. I know there's hard feelings and sadness and a lot of that, but in some ways, like I said earlier, it could turn out this is going to work out fine, for both programs. So, which you hope, because there's such a great Baylor fan base. You don't want that to fall off, and she's woken up the LSU fan base, which is nice to see.
How much is that women's committee eyeing that Baylor LSU matchup as quick as they can get?
Put
to
them
it?
in the same bracket, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is exactly. Charlie Cream projects almost every day. And we're going to have the NCAA reveal tonight. So we'll see. We know the committee kind of likes to do this. So last year it was clear that they set up a potential Iowa UConn matchup to have Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers go against each other in the Sweet 16. I think if they have a chance to do it, to have Baylor and LSU, they'll do it. And if there's ever must-see TV, it would be that.
No question.
And they also like to do it to Kim Mulkey. They did it to her with Texas A&M. I mean,
the 2011 team had to play A&M a fourth time in a regional. You're right. Yeah. And lost after winning 3 times. Yeah.
That was the year when honestly, Baylor and Texas A&M both deserved to be in the Final Four. You guys know that. That was a rough regional to have both of them in.
Also sent her them to Bowling Green when they were the number 1 overall seed, because the head of the committee was the Bowling Green athletic director, and
which is the only time in my life I have been at Bowling Green. I was there.
Yeah, Paul can say, and they ended up winning it all in Denver against Notre Dame. Hey, Michelle, thanks for jumping on with us today. We appreciate it. Ought to be fun to see. I think the women's game, although South Carolina is really good, it does seem to be different. It does seem to be at least more options of someone who can make a run. We've seen that kind of twisting and changing a little bit. Even back when Louisville upset Baylor, Mississippi State had their run, among some others. So thanks for your time. We appreciate it. We'll hope to have you again once the tournament does begin.
Thanks so much for having me.
Michelle Voepel, ESPN.com, on Baylor and Iowa State tonight, and also looking at the rest of the landscape of women's basketball. We'll focus on St. Mary's.